Part 8. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Seong Lang-go. Chapter 71. The giant bear had no time to think about who attacked him, nor did he have time to think about why the opponent's power was so great. He subconsciously let out a roar. Ah! But this roar turned into a scream halfway through. His spine was directly broken by the opponent. The citizens on the street looked at the two in surprise, especially the shop that was just blackmailed by the giant bear. All the people in the shop stood up and looked at the giant bear in Li Anping's hand. Li Anping ignored them. He pinched the opponent's neck with one hand and turned the giant bear's head around. It was like holding a disobedient, shitting puppy, showing a disgusted expression. "Don't do it here, take it away," Li Qian said while sitting in the car. The giant bear didn't react until then. Isn't this little white face a first-level ability user? Why is his power so great? Why can't he even withstand a single move in front of him? But the iron-like palm on his neck still reminded him that he was not dreaming. The huge force pressed on his neck, as if it could tear his neck off at any time. The opponent's strength was far beyond his imagination. And he actually wanted to kill this person just now? Actually provoked this monster. A layer of cold sweat covered the back of the giant bear. He opened his mouth and said, "Sir, I think there is some misunderstanding between us. Please accept my most sincere apology. I am willing to compensate you with gold, weapons, treasures, no matter what." Li Anping ignored him completely and dragged him into the back seat of the car, and his hand never left the giant bear's neck. "I really didn't know that your strength was so strong. If I had known earlier, I would not dare to trouble you even if I had 100 guts. Miss Li, you know, we have no ill intentions. We have also fully cooperated with the brothers who were captured these days. I was just talking casually just now." As the car started, the giant bear continued to beg for mercy, but apart from him, neither Li Qian nor Li Anping spoke. It was not until 10 minutes later that Li Anping asked, "You killed a lot of people in Daxia, didn't you? I heard that when you were collecting debts, you set fire to a family of 4 and burned them to death." The giant bear hesitated and said, "I." The giant bear didn't expect the other party to ask this suddenly, and for a moment he didn't know whether to confess or deny it. But he knew that no matter which one he chose, he had to be quick, and the result of hesitation would only arouse suspicion. Thinking of the other party's strong strength and Li Qian's Daxia dragon bird background, he gritted his teeth and said, "Yes, I did it. At that time, we had just arrived in Emerald City, and we had to be ruthless to establish our authority." "Establish authority?" Li Anping sneered and stopped talking. The giant bear also felt a terrible pressure slowly coming from Li Anping, and then no matter how he begged for mercy, the other party stopped talking, and his heart gradually sank. Just as Li Anping took the giant bear away, on the roof of a building 500 meters away, a man wearing a black windbreaker that covered most of his body was quietly looking at the direction where Li Anping left. Green light kept flashing in his eyes. Looking closely, it seems that countless data are flowing. The man muttered to himself, "According to the information in the database, the giant bear's ability is physical expansion. A second-level ability user must have a grip of at least 200 kilograms to pinch his neck and make him powerless. This Li Anping is very strong and his speed is very fast." His eyes replayed Li Anping's action of grabbing the giant bear's neck. The action that ordinary people's eyes can't capture at all was slowed down twice in his electronic eyes. After slowing down 4 times, the trajectory of Li Anping's hand gradually appeared. His punching speed is about 150 meters per second, which is not bad. The man kept analyzing Li Anping's data and thinking about the purpose of his trip. However, if he knew that Li Anping just hit casually and didn't use even 1/10 of his strength, I don't know what he would think. Such strength is enough to survive in Emerald City. No wonder Jennifer wants to use soft tactics. The man stared at Li Anping in the traffic and laughed, "But she has been in Emerald City for too long and has become timid. When will our company do this?" At this moment, the pager on the man's ear rang. "Tom! You came to Emerald City." The man said in surprise, "Jennifer? I didn't expect you to be well informed." "Tom, I don't know if you are here for the experimental target, but if so, don't take any force. The opponent is very strong, and I have initially gained the opponent's favor. Next, just. Sorry, I will be responsible for this matter next. Just wait for the news." Tom didn't listen to Jennifer's next words, but said a word directly and turned off the communication. Then he watched Li Anping's car leave his sight, and Tom turned and walked towards the stairs, and a document appeared on the retina of his eyes. There was a line on it that was exactly the address where Li Anping lived now. In Fang Chi's villa, it was also very lively this afternoon. Because the current boss of Zhonggaiatang, Lucien, came here secretly with his men. After some communication and threats, facing the strength of Kylin Group far exceeding his own, for the sake of his wealth and life, Lucien had no choice but to compromise. On the second floor of the villa, Lucien bowed his head to Fang Chi in front of the top leaders of Kylin Group. Faced with Lucien's attitude, Fang Chi just smiled and said, "You are much smarter than your nephew. Stay for dinner tonight." Everyone present understood that although the situation had been clear since the battle, because even the special forces failed to stop Fang Chi in time. But until this time, Lucien bowed his head in front of him, and truly established the status of the Kylin Group in Emerald City. This is probably the beginning of the change of Emerald City. And later, the news that the giant bear was captured was also transmitted back to Fang Chi's ears at the fastest speed. The giant bear was captured by Li Qian. Fang Chi looked at the somewhat nervous hedgehog in front of him in confusion, knocking on the table in front of him, and asked, "Didn't I ask you to keep an eye on him, otherwise he would make trouble? What's going on?" Faced with Fang Chi, who has almost unified the Emerald City, the hedgehog has become more and more respectful during this period of time. "I heard from some of my brothers that a man was dragged into a car when he went to collect protection fees this morning." Hedgehog paused, looked at Fang Chi's face, and then said carefully, "Just now, a brother found the body of the giant bear. All the bones were broken." With a click, Fang Chi knocked a large crack on the table in front of him. Fang Chi narrowed his eyes. "Who did it?" It should be Li Qian's people. Someone saw that Qin Yang's group threw the body of the giant bear out." Fang Chi exhaled and said slowly, "Have you figured out the person I asked you to check last time?" "No," Hedgehog said, "I only know that he often follows Li Qian, but he should not be a member of the special forces. I heard that Li Qian specially called Qin Yang's group over to protect this man." "Huh, so this man is very important to Li Qian." Fang Chi, he said coldly, "Giant Bear is a veteran of our group, I can't let him die in vain." Hedgehog advised, "But Li Qian is from the special forces after all, and is a member of Daxia Lonke. What if? Then get that man, I only want one of his legs. Let that little girl know, don't think that you can bully me just because you are wearing that skin." Fang Chi saw that Hedgehog still wanted to persuade him, and said decisively, "Hedgehog, we are now desperate people who put their heads on the belt. If we want to return to Bayou and take back everything that belongs to us, we must be ruthless enough. We must make everyone who has noticed us afraid, so afraid that they can't help but tremble just thinking about dealing with us. Do you understand?" Hedgehog nodded helplessly, "I understand." Speaking of this, Fang Chi seemed to remember the other party's unruly eyes and pretending to be calm look when he met Li Anping that time. He added, "Then you and Lei Jiao will go. That kid is also a capable person. Be careful not to get into trouble. Also, don't hurt other members of the special forces. I said one leg is one leg. No more, no less." "I understand." Hedgehog could only agree. Although he knew that the other party would be angry if he casually disabled Li Qian. But what Fang Chi said was not wrong. And now Zhonggaiatang has joined the Kylin group. It's time to fight back appropriately and let that stinky girl know what's good for her. So that night, Fang Qi entertained Lucien and his group in the villa, and Hedgehog and Lei Jiao rushed to Li Anping's residence. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 72. Hedgehog and Lei Jiao stood at the entrance of an alley, and from time to time they would look at an apartment across the alley. "Are you sure it's here?" Lei Jiao asked in a low voice. "Of course, such a simple thing, do you think I would check it wrong? It's in 606, he lives alone." Lei Jiao nodded, "I'm just confirming, then I'll go over, you wait here for me." Hedgehog hummed, and when he looked at Lei Jiao, the other party had disappeared. Hedgehog muttered, "Sneaky guy." Although he said so, Hedgehog still trusted Lei Jiao's strength very much. As the only third-level ability user in the Kylin group besides Fang Qi, Lei Jiao is even faster than Fang Qi in terms of speed. In addition to his cautious and careful style and superb infiltration skills, he has always been the assassination and espionage master of the Kylin group. Even the giant bear, who has always had conflicts with Lei Jiao, has to admire him in this regard. Let Lei Jiao deal with a first-level ability user, Hedgehog will not worry at all. The only thing to be on guard against is to avoid unnecessary trouble. While thinking this, Hedgehog saw Qin Yang and two of his men coming from the other side of the street, heading towards Li Anping's apartment. "Damn it, don't they only follow when they go out?" Hedgehog cursed inwardly. He was not worried that the other party would hinder Lei Jiao, but what if Lei Jiao accidentally hurt them? After all, they were members of the special forces on duty. Once they were killed, it would be like tearing their faces apart. And if Qin Yang and his men found out that Lei Jiao was going to destroy Li Anping, it would obviously be impossible for them not to stop him. Bad luck. Hedgehog's eyes rolled around, not knowing what he was thinking. Qin Yang and his three men were walking slowly over there, still wearing uniforms, but the leader Qin Yang was holding a rectangular box in his hand, and no one knew what was inside. The two men were obviously very curious and couldn't help asking, "Boss, what's in it?" "I don't know either. Commander Li asked me to bring it to Li Anping." Qin Yang shook his head. "He also asked me to tell him that there was no problem." This monster. When Li Anping was mentioned, the other two looked a little uncomfortable. During this period of time, they followed Li Qian and Li Anping, seemingly to protect them, but in fact, they were specifically to clean up for Li Anping. In less than a week, they saw more corpses than in the past few decades. Although they were all guys who deserved to die, they were obviously still not used to seeing Li Anping killing people so cruelly as former members of the police force. At this moment, one of them suddenly pointed to the front and said, "Who is that?" The hedgehog had already stood up from the alley, laughing, and then walked straight towards Qin Yang and his group. In this troubled time, the other party's strange behavior obviously aroused the vigilance of Qin Yang and his group. The three men reached for the pistols on their waists and asked loudly, "Who are you? Stop now, or we'll shoot." Hedgehog ignored the three men, but quickened his pace and walked towards them. "Did you hear us? We told you to stop." The two men behind Qin Yang raised their guns and pointed them at Hedgehog. "If you don't stop, we'll shoot." However, Hedgehog's pace did not change, and the two men who raised their guns only felt a pain in their heads, as if their brains were pierced by an invisible long needle. The severe pain caused both of them to fall to the ground with their heads in their hands and scream. "What did you do?" Qin Yang immediately pulled out his gun and pointed it at Hedgehog. During this period of time, they followed Li Qian and Li Anping, and because they had joined the special forces, they gradually learned about the monster of the ability user. The man in front of them was obviously an unknown ability user who was attacking them. Thinking of this, Qin Yang subconsciously wanted to shoot, but the next moment, he felt as if a long silver needle pierced his brain. The pain that penetrated deep into his bone marrow made him want to roll on the ground with his head in his arms. But he did not fall down. He struggled hard and half knelt on the ground. He raised his pistol with his hands swaying and shot at the hedgehog. Bang! Bang! 2 consecutive shots, all missed. The severe pain in his brain made it impossible for him to concentrate on shooting. The hedgehog looked at Qin Yang unexpectedly. For ordinary people, your willpower is really strong. The hedgehog's ability is called mental puncture, which can pierce his mental power into the opponent's brain like a needle. Ordinary people will faint from the pain just facing this kind of pain. Once a person's brain is stimulated by the hedgehog's ability many times, he will become an idiot or even brain dead. The hedgehog has used this trick to kill people invisibly countless times. Only strong willpower and mental strength can be exempted from his ability. He looked at Qin Yang with appreciation for a few more times, and the next second, he shook his head and said, "It's a pity that you chose the wrong path." The gap between people with special abilities and ordinary people cannot be made up by willpower. The 3 people in front of him had no power to resist. 2 of them were already unconscious, and although Qin Yang was still awake, he had no power to resist. Hedgehog didn't plan to pierce Qin Yang's mind again, which might cause irreversible damage to the other party. He planned to walk up and knock him out. But as soon as he took a step, a loud bang sounded above and behind him. How could Lei Jiao be so careless and make such a big noise? Thinking of this, Hedgehog quickly turned his head and looked in the direction of Li Anping's apartment. In Li Anping's room, the entire outer wall was blown open. Amid the explosion, bricks, cement, smoke, and many small fragments and scattered wires and water pipes all flew in the direction of the street. As the wall was blown open, a figure flew out with the wall. In mid-air, the figure swung his limbs, as if he wanted to grab something, but the force that blasted him out was too huge. In less than a tenth of a second, he was smashed on the cement road of the street by that force. Boom! With a loud noise, the figure crashed into the ground, and the layers of cement ground were shattered, revealing cracks, and the position where the figure was located was slightly sunken, forming a small pit. The hedgehog's heart sank, and he looked at the figure who was no longer moving, and his face immediately turned pale. The person who was thrown out was Lei Xiao. He had stopped breathing while lying on the ground. His entire head was covered with blood, and blood bubbles continued to appear at the corners of his mouth. His right foot was twisted into a knot. Lei Xiao's left foot was flattened, as if it had been crushed by a steamroller. The opponent obviously grabbed Lei Xiao's left foot and threw him out, and the huge force directly blasted the wall completely. Then in the next moment, the hedgehog felt that he was being stared at. Just like a frog staring at a fly, the tiger set its sights on the rabbit. It was a feeling of being stared at by one's natural enemy and being stared at as fish. It was a feeling that the hedgehog had never had before. The hedgehog swallowed a mouthful of saliva and wanted to move his feet, but found that he was stared at by the other party, and he dared not even move his legs. He could only move his head slowly, inch by inch, and look at the place where the wall was blasted open. Then, he saw Li Anping standing there. With a gentle appearance, a slender and fit body, and a white sportswear, he looked like a college student. But the blood was still flowing all over his body, and even blood was dripping from his hair. Looking at Li Anping's playful eyes, the hedgehog just felt funny. He was going to cripple a leg of this kind of demon king? Compared to what the other party did to Lei Xiao, his behavior was just like a child playing house. Can I? The hedgehog wanted to say something bravely. But Li Anping just shook his head. No, you all have to die. Think of some last words. You can't break the rules. Our leader has unified the entire emerald. I know Lei Xiao is wrong, but we don't want your life. You killed him, which is already over the line. If you kill me again, our leader will not let it go. But Li Anping just shook his head, and then looked at the hedgehog teasingly. That look was like watching a pig that knew it was about to be slaughtered, struggling desperately in the pigpen. The hedgehog clenched his fists and stared at Li Anping unwillingly. Ah! He suddenly roared, his spirit turned into a long needle, and stabbed at the other party fiercely. His ability to attack is very special. Even if a third or fourth level expert is not prepared in advance and is suddenly hit, he will not feel good. At least he will be stunned for a few seconds. And these few seconds are the time Hedgehog leaves for himself to escape. I have to try it no matter what. Thinking of this, Hedgehog used all his strength. The long needle transformed by his mental power can even be seen by the naked eye. It shot towards Li Anping like a laser and drilled into the opponent's brain. But what appeared in front of Hedgehog was an even more despairing reality. What is this? How can humans have such a spirit? Devil, this guy is a devil. After the long needle of the spirit drilled into Li Anping's brain, there was no reaction. Hedgehog felt that his spirit seemed to have pierced into an infinitely wide space, a vortex of death. There was death, pain, and despair everywhere. He saw countless souls wandering in this world. They were constantly tortured, detained, and then repeatedly killed, and even swallowed. Everywhere he looked, there was hell. The long spiritual needle was not put down, and was not even defended. If the hedgehog felt that his spiritual power was a stream, then the other party was like the spirit of countless people gathered together, just like a world. Using a stream to attack a world? No, he couldn't even cause the other party to respond, just like a drop of water merged into the sea, and the spiritual piercing was completely ineffective. The hedgehog even suspected that all attacks related to the spirit were ineffective against the man in front of him. Li Anping didn't feel that he was attacked. He just heard the hedgehog roar, and then stared at him motionlessly. But the imagined attack did not come. Li Anping looked at the hedgehog impatiently, and the other party was still looking at him stupidly. So he jumped out and appeared in front of the hedgehog. Seeing that the other party still had no reaction, he punched the other party's head directly, smashing the hedgehog's head to the ground. Then Li Anping looked at Qin Yang, who had collapsed to the ground, called Li Qian, and ordered, "Send someone to clean up here. I'm going to Fang Qi's villa first. After I clean up here, you all come to find me." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 73. On top of the building, Li Anping flew hundreds of meters in one leap, jumping from the roof of one building to the roof of another. After leaving the city center, Li Anping moved forward in alleys, small buildings, and shadows. The entire movement was swift and covered. After only half an hour, Li Anping had already reached the suburbs. If he ran further along the mountain road for half an hour, he would reach Fang Qi's villa. But what Li Anping didn't know was that just outside Fang Qi's villa, Tom was tracking Li Anping's whereabouts through spy satellites. "Are you really going to come here next?" Tom said to himself. "This guy is really murderous." As an S-class doomsday slayer in Violet, Tom has the right to call the local Violet's remote support anytime and anywhere. Calling a spy satellite like this was done through a vulnerability in the Daxia satellite, and such a call would be immediately discovered by the Daxia authorities. In other words, in order to monitor Li Anping, Tom directly handed over a satellite communication vulnerability. "I hope you are really worth this much money." Tom opened the rectangular box in front of him, took out the parts one by one and started to assemble them. Vaguely, it seemed to be a sniper rifle over 2 meters tall. At this time, in Fang Qi's villa, in the lobby on the first floor, more than 10 people were sitting around the dining table eating. The scene was lively yet orderly. Fang Qi was sitting on the main seat, just eating silently, but indifferent to the crowds on the table. Although several of his subordinates tried their best to amuse and heat up the atmosphere, it was to no avail. Suddenly, Fang Qi raised his glass and toasted to the person next to him. "Old Lu, I'm sorry, the atmosphere today is not very good. I ignored you." The person called Lao Lu is the current boss of Zhongai Hall, Lucien. He was over 60 years old. Although his health was good, most of his hair was gray. When he saw Fang Qi toasting him, he also looked respectful. "Hey, Mr. Qi, you are so polite. We have joined the Kailan group today. Then Brother Xiong is one of my own, he is in trouble now, and to be honest, I am not in the mood to eat. Mr. Qi, do you want me to send a few people?" Lucien made a downward slashing motion. When facing Fang Qi, Lucien, who was only a first-level ability user, was completely lacking in confidence. Originally, he wanted to join Han Wei from the special service team, but Han Wei was taken away and an unknown little girl was sent from above. How can this suppress the situation? Lucien thought about it and voted for Fang Qi. According to his estimation, after a few months, the girl had failed in the Emerald City and would either be transferred away or give in to them. If he is transferred, then if the new captain is capable, he will rebel against Fang Qi, and the other party will not dare to do anything to him. After all, there are more than 100,000 juniors in Zhongai Hall, and he doesn't believe that the people above him dare to deal with him at will. However, facing a powerful desperado like Fang Qi, he still planned to give in. After all, the opponent's record of killing Lu Jun and 5 other people was too shocking, and his strength could be said to be unfathomable, so Lucien also kept a low profile this afternoon. He believed that Fang Qi would be the leader before he completely took over Zhongai Hall. "I will never embarrass him." Sure enough, Fang Qi smiled and patted Lucien on the shoulder, and said gently, "No need to trouble brothers, I have already let Hedgehog and Thunder Dragon take care of this matter." Fang Qi lowered his head and looked at his watch and said, looking at it, "They are almost here." Thinking of this, Fang Qi showed a mysterious smile, looked at Lucien and said, "You just eat and drink well today. I know Lao Lu, if you like young girls, there will be a mystery show after dinner." "Haha, thank you very much, Mr. Qi," Lucien said with a smile after hearing the words. Half an hour later, Lucien was helped to the room upstairs while burping. All the men he brought were guarding downstairs. After opening the door, he sent the servant away, and then walked into the bedroom with an expectant look on his face. I saw that the entire bedroom was shrouded in bright pink lights. On the big bed in the middle of the bedroom, a person was lying there covered by a quilt. Viewed from the back, the human figure looks very petite. Lucien licked his lips, stretched out his hand and opened the quilt, and a sleeping girl appeared in front of him. The girl was only less than 1.2 meters tall, and her face looked incredibly young. She was probably less than 10 years old. She was still wearing a primary school uniform. Lucien could be her grandfather in front of her. At this time, Lucien saw the sleeping little girl, her eyes were shining, and a satisfied smile appeared on her face, even the age spots on her cheeks were squeezed together. He stretched his head in front of the girl, opened his nostrils and greedily inhaled the girl's scent. "It's not easy now that the lone wolf is gone, I can't even take a bite. I don't know where the Kailan group caught the best." Thinking of this, Lucien couldn't wait to take off his clothes and threw them on the ground, revealing his skinny body. But when he was about to take off his pants, a scream pierced the night sky. "What's going on?" Lucien looked at the girl on the bed with hesitation in his eyes, but the next moment, a series of screams mixed with gunshots woke up the entire villa. "Enemy attack! To the east! Everyone bring guns!" Lucien quickly put on his clothes again and ran downstairs. When he saw his men running over, he hurriedly asked, "What's going on? Who broke in?" "Have no idea. It seems like the police are here." In the chaos, Fang Qi came out, waved his hand and shouted, "Pick up your guns, rush out, and shoot anyone you don't know. I don't want anyone alive." Fang Qi took the machine gun handed over by his men and rushed out with a dark face. The younger brothers in other houses and Lucien and his group also rushed out with him. But wherever they passed, They saw no other enemies except the corpses on the ground. But the screams of the men never stopped. One moment it sounded in the east of the villa, and the next moment it sounded in the west of the villa. It was as if many people were attacking the villa at the same time, but when Fang Qi and his men arrived, there was no one else except the corpses on the ground. "Damn, it's a capable person," Fang Qi shouted angrily. "Everyone follow me, don't give him the opportunity to defeat them one by one." So 40 or 50 people crowded together and stood together in the garden of the villa. A group of people raised their guns and aimed in all directions like frightened birds. Only people with special abilities like Fang Qi and Lucien remained calm. But when Fang Qi saw that there were only a few dozen people left in the villa, he couldn't help cursing. "You know, this villa is home to all the members of the Kylan group. Now, in just over 10 minutes, only a few dozen people were killed. How could Fang Qi be so angry that his eyes were blazing with fire? Damn it, I'm going to cut this bastard into pieces." Fang Qi gritted his teeth and said, "You just stay here, I'll go find him alone." No one disagreed. In a duel between high-level special abilities, ordinary people or low-level special abilities can only be a burden. With Fang Qi's skills, it would be even more powerful to deal with the enemy alone. Lucien even thought that if the other party was wise enough, after sneaking and killing so many people, he should retreat and run away when facing Fang Qi, who was alone. But the other party obviously thought differently. Li Anping broke in directly. When the guard asked him a question, he punched through the iron gate and the guard's chest. Then the patrolmen nearby rushed over, but they were killed one after another without firing a shot. As a result, more people rushed over from a distance. Pistols, machine guns, and rocket launchers were all used skillfully by the members of the Kylan group. After all, they were mercenaries who made a living from war. In just 3 minutes, they reacted quickly, and then attacked Li Anping continuously as if they had fought a war. Bullets were fired from all directions. But it was useless. The man in front of them was like a meat grinder, killing everyone he could see without leaving a single one. The eyes could see the slightest changes, and the ears could hear the breathing, heartbeat, and the sound of changing magazines. So no one could escape Li Anping's killing, whether hiding in the attic, standing on the roof, in the bushes, or on the branches. And when Li Anping slowly walked towards Fang Qi and others in the garden, it also meant that the members of the Kylan group in the entire villa were only the people in front of him. Fang Qi looked at Li Anping coming over, and his face suddenly became darker. Okay, I was wrong. I didn't expect you to be a master. So, Lei Jiao and Hedgehog have been ambushed by you, right? Where is Li Qian? Where is she hiding? Let him come out to see me." Li Anping looked at him as if he was looking at a dead person. He didn't say a word. Instead, when he saw Lucien, he nodded and said, "Be careful. I don't want to kill you, so you'd better not resist for a while, lest I kill you by mistake." Seeing that he was completely ignored, Fang Qi laughed 3 times, and black scales grew on his body. Lightning flashed out, and his body also swelled in an instant. The surging muscles even burst his shirt. More black thoughts came out of him. The people around him couldn't stand the oppression of the huge force, and couldn't help but retreat, forming an open space around Fang Qi. The head covered with scales looked extremely hideous at this time. Fang Qi, who turned into a monster, roared viciously, "I will kill you first, and then catch that girl Li Qian." Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 74. Just when Fang Qi transformed and attracted all of Li Anping's attention, on the cliff 1,000 meters away, Tom looked at Li Anping in the scope, smiled triumphantly, and slowly pulled the trigger. In less than a second, the bullet with huge kinetic energy hit Li Anping. I don't know what kind of firearm Tom used, but the bullet was very slender, extremely fast, and extremely penetrating. Fang Qi and others standing nearby didn't even notice that in just a second, a small hole was directly pierced through Li Anping's lungs. This was originally a sniper rifle specially used for assassination and infiltration. Li Anping only felt a tightness in his chest, and couldn't help but take a step forward. Feeling that his lungs were pierced, he immediately turned his head and looked angrily in the direction of the bullet. Just by squinting his eyes slightly, the scene 1,000 meters away suddenly became clear, just in time to see a blond foreigner slowly putting away the sniper rifle in his hand. Humph, Li Anping snorted coldly, no longer caring about Fang Qi and his group in front of him, and jumped out of the villa, running towards Tom's direction. In his eyes, Fang Qi and others can be killed at any time, and if this foreigner who attacked him escapes, he will not be able to find him. The pupil of Tom's electronic eye shrank and turned into a black dot, and he saw Li Anping moving at high speed clearly. When he saw that Li Anping was running towards him, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Throwing the sniper rifle on the ground, he ran down the mountain. In the villa, Fang Qi looked at Li Anping who was running outside and roared, "Can you escape?" He took a step directly and hit the wall of the villa, blasted the wall and rushed out, chasing in the direction where Li Anping left. "You can't escape. Li Qian, and you can't escape." Fang Qi's huge body was like a tank in the woods. Any stone or tree that appeared in front of him would be smashed to pieces by him. But although Fang Qi was running at full speed, Li Anping in his eyes had gradually turned into a black dot and was about to disappear. "Don't even think about leaving." Fang Qi was suddenly full of lightning, and as the electric current stimulated his muscles and nerves, his speed increased again. But Li Anping in front of him suddenly jumped off a cliff. Fang Qi chased to the cliff in a rage, but there was no trace of Li Anping in the vast sea of trees. He shouted unwillingly, "I will definitely find you." After thinking about it, he had to take a detour from the other side and rush to the jungle under the cliff. Li Anping jumped after Tom. The two fell into the woods under the cliff together, but when Li Anping raised his head, the other's figure had disappeared. Li Anping touched his chest, and the injury to his lungs had healed. Then the other's voice rang. "How is it? Do you feel a little uncomfortable in your chest?" He, I could have killed you with that shot, but my goal this time is to capture you alive. So I can only use some medicine. This is our latest anesthetic bullet, which can paralyze an elephant within 10 seconds. Li Anping looked towards the place where the sound came from, and found that the sound seemed to be wandering around. He couldn't tell where the sound came from for a while. "Ha ha ha, I know you are immune to toxins, but this kind of medicine is used to deal with powerful people with abilities. After entering the body, the medicinal properties will directly act on the nerves, muscles, and brain. As long as you are still a human being and your ability has not reached level 5 to transform your body, it is impossible not to be paralyzed. Now, it should be about time, right?" Li Anping looked towards the place where the sound came from last, and Tom was walking out slowly. He had taken off the outer clothes he was wearing. His whole body was wrapped in a thin layer of metal armor, and he was obviously a modified person like Jennifer's two men. But whether it was the black paint or the complicated patterns on the armor, it showed that he was definitely not an ordinary modified person. Tom pulled out a high-frequency dagger from the armor plate on the outside of his thigh and walked slowly towards Li Anping. "Don't worry, I won't kill you yet. I'll just cut off your limbs first to make sure you're not in danger, and then put you in the bag and send you back." As he walked, he scanned Li Anping's motionless body over and over again with his mechanical eyes. But suddenly, his steps stopped. "No, your body is not paralyzed." Li Anping laughed. After his body evolved, it was no longer a human structure. His muscles were as strong as steel, his nerves were like steel wires inserted into his bones, and his brain could be rebuilt with soul energy at any time. In any aspect, he was already developing in the direction of a monster. The anesthetic was naturally ineffective against him. He appeared in front of Tom in a flash, facing the other's surprised face, and punched him. But Tom was one of the best modified people in Violet after all. His nervous system had been assisted by sophisticated circuits and remote supercomputers. Although he only saw a black shadow flashing in front of him, he still reacted after all. He blocked his head with one hand, and stabbed the shadow in front of him with the other hand holding the high-frequency dagger. He didn't believe that the other party would dare not dodge the high-frequency dagger. This was also the result calculated by the supercomputer. Sure enough, the shadow retreated, but before Tom could react, the other party had already kicked him on the knee with a whip kick. In Li Anping's eyes, Tom's movements seemed like a movie that was slowed down 50 times, and his body was leaning and trying to fall sideways. He thought about it and kicked Tom in the waist again. With a snap, the exoskeleton armor shattered directly, and the power was then transmitted to Tom's body, bursting out a series of sparks. The electronic equipment on his body could not withstand such a huge impact, and a large group of electric sparks flashed. And driven by this force, Tom flew into the sky with his whole body hunched. It was not until mid-air that Tom reacted, and at this time his speed had gradually slowed down and began to fall slowly. A bang sounded on the ground below Tom, and Tom's electronic eyes tried their best to capture it, but he could only see a vague black shadow flashing in front of him. At this time, Tom's heart was no longer proud of what he had just done, but was completely filled with fear. The strength that Li Anping showed now was simply a demon in human skin. The shadow flashed by, and with a crackling sound, a large ball of electric light emerged from his right hand, and the entire mechanized right arm was knocked unconscious by Li Anping's palm. With a roar, Tom, who was in fear, swung his left fist with the help of a supercomputer, and hit the shadow with a sound of wind and thunder. His fist was wrapped in metal armor, and the impact joints at his wrist and elbow amplified the power layer by layer, hitting Li Anping with a full 2 tons of power. But this punch that was enough to destroy a city was taken lightly by Li Anping with his right hand. He held Tom's fist and showed a cruel smile. "You are quite strong." At this time, Li Anping and Tom stopped rising in the air and began to fall to the ground together. Li Anping looked at the other party's panicked eyes, and clenched his right hand holding Tom's fist. In an instant, countless metal fragments, wires, and twisted parts burst out from the gaps between Li Anping's right fingers. Amid screams, Tom retracted his bare left hand. But he had no time to regret and fear, as Li Anping had already pushed him to the ground by the neck. Boom! Amidst the flying sand and rocks, the two men made a small pit on the dirt ground. Li Anping rode on Tom's body and said lightly, "Didn't you say that you would cut off all my limbs?" As he spoke, he grabbed Tom's left arm and pulled it hard. In a flash of lightning, he directly pulled off the opponent's metal arm, and also pulled several wires and energy pipes on the arm and shoulder into 2 parts. Tom roared, which sounded like the desperate roar of a beast. He opened his mouth and a laser beam shot out. The high-density laser beam directly melted the epidermis of Li Anping's shoulder, and then gasified and evaporated. Seeing that the laser shot out of Tom's mouth was about to move towards Li Anping's chest and destroy his entire body, Li Anping was quick-eyed and quick-handed. He grabbed Tom's chin directly and squeezed it hard. The alloy skeleton was like mud at this time. Tom's chin, jaw, and neck were directly squeezed into a ball by Li Anping's big hands, and the part that emitted high-energy lasers was directly crushed by the huge force. But the next moment, Tom's body suddenly shook, and a continuous stream of high-energy ultrasonic waves was released from his chest. Li Anping, who was closest to Tom, was hit first. The air pressure caused by this high-frequency sound wave is enough to make ordinary people completely lose their combat ability, and can even penetrate a 15-meter wall to kill people. But Li Anping, who was enveloped by the ultrasonic wave at this time, seemed to be fine. He tilted his head, looked at Tom and said, "There are quite a lot of tricks." Then he reached out to grab Tom's chest, and pulled off the exoskeleton armor at the first stroke, and then stripped off a lot of wires, protective layers, and buffer layers. Finally, he found the ultrasonic generator, pulled him off hard, and threw him aside. Seeing that all his means were easily cracked, Tom looked at Li Anping and shook his head desperately, as if he wanted to beg for mercy, but unfortunately his throat and jaw had been squeezed into a ball and he couldn't make any sound at all. No matter what means he used, facing Li Anping was as ridiculous as a toy. The opponent easily broke his fatal attack. This strength was beyond his imagination. At this time, he was filled with despair, regret, and annoyance. The shadow of death was like a poisonous snake, entwined around his heart. But just when Li Anping thought that the opponent had no ability to resist, many small holes suddenly appeared on Tom's body, and a lot of white mist was ejected from the small holes, completely covering Li Anping like a cloud. What is this? He should know that poison gas is ineffective against me. The mist quickly enveloped the area of 100 meters. Although Li Anping did not feel uncomfortable, he also planned to retreat. If he had received training from the great Xia dragon bird and had been on the battlefield, he would know that what was ejected from Tom's body was called aerosol. At this time, it was too late for Li Anping to leave. Tom's eyes flashed with despair. He regretted that he had rashly come to deal with Li Anping here. If he had known earlier, he would have brought more than a dozen Doom warriors. But now it's too late to regret. His self-destruction program has been activated. The next moment, fierce flames came out of his body, and the entire cloud exploded. The aerosol and the oxygen in the air reacted with each other, releasing a large amount of energy in an instant. The position where Li Anping and Tom were located was occupied by a huge fireball. The temperature of the fireball exceeded 2,500 degrees, and within a second, it had covered a radius of thousands of miles. The shock wave swept the entire forest with rolling air waves, and then the forest was turned into ashes by the flames in the first time. Under the high temperature and high pressure, the entire ground became a scorched earth. 1 minute later, on the ground opened by the explosion, fireballs and smoke were slowly rising into the sky, turning into a mushroom cloud in the valley. This is a fuel air bomb, which not only has the destructive power of a small nuclear bomb, but also has a serious lack of oxygen for about 4 minutes after the explosion, because oxygen is fully utilized in the explosion, and the whole scene will be severely hypoxic for about 4 minutes, causing a second killing of the survivors of the explosion. 1,000 meters away, Fang Qi stared at the mushroom cloud in the distance in a daze, thought about it, and walked over. In the villa, he felt the vibration and saw the fire. The people of the Kylan group seemed to have guessed something at the first time. When they saw the mushroom cloud rising, they also rushed to the explosion site in a hurry. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xianglang Ge. Chapter 75. Within Daxia, there is a distant command center. Wilson, the top management of Violet Bacteria, was looking at the huge screen in front of him with a livid face, but the screen was already covered by a large snowflake. It was this screen just now, which had been broadcasting the entire battle live through Tom's electronic eyes. The connection has been completely lost, a subordinate on the side said. The communication system has no feedback signal. Lord Tom should be dead. This level of explosion center, even the transformation of the Doomslayer, is unbearable. Li Anping, Wilson murmured to himself, compared to Jennifer's report, this Li Anping's value far exceeds it, right? The subordinate said with lingering fear, yes, according to our calculations, the experimental target's bench press strength exceeds 20 tons, his punching speed is close to the speed of sound, and the structure of his muscles, internal organs, and nerves are also different from ordinary people, resulting in his ability to resist blows. It can be compared to ordinary tank armor. This may not be his full strength. It is obviously beyond the theoretical limit of the human body. We suspect that, he is probably not human. Haha, not a human being, Wilson sneered, "Is this your conclusion? He is a person with superpowers. Nothing is impossible for him with superpowers. What do you think is the possibility of his survival under the attack of a cloud bomb? How much?" The man thought for a while and said, "After the cloud bomb exploded, the core temperature reached 2500 degrees. It is impossible to survive solely relying on the body. Unless he has other abilities, he will be dead." Wilson nodded and said, "Send a team to check. Tom's remains need to be recovered. As for Li Enping, his body is of great research value. If you want to see a person alive, you must see a corpse." In the valley, the fireball has disappeared, but the dust blown out by the shockwave is still walking in the air. Fang Chi squatted on the ground, looking at the large scorched earth in front of him, a trace of doubt flashing in his eyes. It must be a cloud bomb. But who detonated it? Why did it detonate here? And where did that pretty boy escape to? Fang Chi had doubts one after another, but no one answered them for him. He had no choice but to walk towards the center of the explosion, hoping to find the answer there. As Fang Chi approached step by step, he could only see large areas of scorched earth, and the originally lush woods had disappeared. Nothing else. After walking a few hundred meters, Fang Chi tightened his eyes and walked forward quickly. In his field of vision, a wreckage finally appeared. It was a piece of metal that had turned completely black. From Fang Chi's direction, it seemed to be part of some equipment. He walked up and found that the metal block was still emitting an astonishing high temperature, and it was obviously heated by the explosion just now. At this moment, rustling footsteps sounded from behind Fang Chi. "Who?" Fang Chi turned his head and looked behind him. Amidst the smoke and dust in the sky, a figure was walking towards Fang Chi. "Speak, who are you?" The man didn't answer, but walked towards Fang Chi step by step. The black scales on Fang Chi's neck stood up one by one, and he looked at the direction of the figure with a wary face. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew away the smoke and dust in front of his eyes, revealing the appearance of the person coming. It was a man with a bald head, no eyebrows, and no clothes on. The man's face was extremely pale, and his lips had no trace of blood. The strangest thing is that his skin is white and rosy, and looks as delicate as a baby's. "It's you." After watching for a while, Fang Chi suddenly opened his eyes and shouted, and then laughed the next moment, "It should really be said that it's your misfortune. I might have been unable to catch up with you, but I didn't expect this explosion. I brought you here too." Fang Chi's right hand emitted electric light, and the blue electric light made his smile even more ferocious. "Although I don't know why you changed your appearance, I still want to subdue you first and then I'll ask you. You think about it?" Before Fang Chi finished speaking, Li Enping had disappeared. Then a huge force hit him from the back of his head, and Fang Chi fell to the ground like a dog. He wanted to stand up, but found that the other party's foot stepped on the back of his head, and the frightening force pressed his head into the soil inch by inch. Sand and gravel filled his mouth, and if he hadn't closed his eyes, there would have even been dirt in his eyes. "I'm sorry, I'm in a bad mood right now." Li Enping's voice came from behind him, "so whatever I do to you next is just pure venting." Then Fang Chi felt a force 10 times stronger than before pressing down on the opponent's feet. He slapped the ground with all his strength and raised his neck, but the opponent's feet were pressing down on his head like a mountain. His head was pressed under the soil, and even his skull and scales began to gradually deform. A whining sound sounded from Li Enping's feet. It was the sound of struggle coming from Fang Chi's mouth, but because his mouth was covered with dirt, Li Enping couldn't hear what he said clearly, and he didn't want to hear it. A creaking sound came from the back of Li Enping's head. Fang Chi's hands grabbed the ground hard, and his thick fingers dug 10 long scratches on the ground. Then electric light appeared on Fang Chi's body, and the blue electric sparks were instantly transmitted to Li Enping's body, but it was enough to electrocute a whale. It only made Li Enping frown slightly, and the power under his feet slowed down. Just when Fang Qi thought he had succeeded, the next moment, a more ferocious and unreasonable force came from Li Anping's feet, and the back of Fang Qi's head was broken. With a puff, just like a watermelon thrown on the ground, Fang Qi's head finally exploded. His body twitched unconsciously for a few times, and then stopped moving. I'm afraid his mood when he was stepped on was quite complicated. From the anger and violence at the beginning, to the shock of Li Anping's strength later, and the disbelief when he found that he couldn't resist anyway, until he felt despair, absurdity, and inexplicable in the end. Who is this guy? How could he be so strong? I was stepped on to death like a cockroach. Wasn't he running away all the time? I am Fang Qi, the leader of the Kylin group, the man who inherited the blood of the Bai royal family and unified the dark world of Emerald City, but was stepped on to death by an unknown little white face like a cockroach. How is this possible? Until the last second before his death, Fang Qi still found this fact unbelievable and absurd. But the fact was so real in front of everyone. Regret filled Fang Qi's mind, but it was too late. When Lucien led the rest of the Kylin group to the explosion site, he saw this fact. Fang Qi, who had the strength of a quasi-4th level ability user, Fang Qi with the ability of Kylin blood, Fang Qi who defeated Lu Jun and the 4 heavenly kings, was trampled into the mud by someone. The other party was even naked, with his hands on his chest, looking at himself and his people slowly. That contemptuous expression was as if he had just stepped on a cockroach. How are you going to die? Lucien only said one word, and the other party frowned impatiently. The next moment, Lucien only saw a shadow passing by, and the people around him had fallen down covered in blood. Forget it, I'm too lazy to talk to you. Li Anping's bloody hand stopped in front of Lucien, and the bright red color, like a flower, bloomed on the collar of Lucien's chest. You are Lucien. I am Lucien answered stupidly, without any thought of resistance in his heart. The strength shown by the other party has completely exceeded his cognition. Okay, Li Anping held Lucien's neck, as if holding a basket, and walked towards the villa. You will pass the position of the leader of Zhonggai Hall to someone later. Lucien just nodded blankly, and he didn't know whether he reacted or not. Li Anping's muttering came to his ears. How come he died after a few steps? It's really troublesome. After killing multiple ability users in succession, Li Anping's current physical fitness has reached 6.1 in strength, 5.0 in speed, and 6.9 in physical fitness. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 76. When the riot in Emerald City finally came to an end, thousands of kilometers away from the East Continent where Daxia was located, in the distant West Continent, something that would affect the direction of the entire human world in a few years was quietly happening. On the West Continent, on the west coast of the Amist Federation. It was 11 o'clock in the evening. For some reason, the moon in the sky today had been emitting a pale light, which made people who saw it feel a little palpitating. On the beach on the coast, 2 rows of strange footprints could be vaguely seen. They looked like horse hoof prints, but they were not as messy as those of 4 legs. The tide rose to the beach and covered the hoof prints. When the sea water receded, the hoof prints on the beach were no longer so obvious. The traces of hoof prints extended all the way to the woods beside the beach. A smell of blood came from the ground. I saw a dead seabird on the edge of the woods. Half of the seabird's head was bitten off. It seemed that it was eaten by something, and the rest of the body was casually discarded on the ground. Looking at the dark forest, the silence was a little weird, making people feel a chill coming up, as if something terrible was staring at you. At this moment, a scream suddenly came from the depths of the forest, but the next moment the scream stopped, as if someone had pressed it back into the throat. Faintly, a strange chewing sound could be heard. Going in the direction of the sound, you can see the corpses of various animals along the way, birds with their heads bitten off, and small animals with their stomachs cut open. All of them were thrown on the ground casually, as if they were toys that children were tired of playing with. The moonlight in the sky became paler and paler, but it could not dispel the darkness in the forest. Where the scream came from, a blonde white body was lying straight on the ground, his chest had been broken open, and the blood-red internal organs were all over the ground. His face was completely terrified as if he had seen a ghost. And two dark shadows were crawling beside him. In the dim woods, the black shadows were completely invisible. The bodies of the two black shadows seemed to be constantly emitting black smoke, as if they were darkness themselves. One of the black shadows pulled out something that was not sure whether it was a tentacle or a claw from the white man's head, and a series of brains were brought to the ground. Then, a strange human voice sounded, as if it was a baby who learned to speak for the first time. The voice was intermittent, but the tone itself was full of maturity, and it didn't sound like a child's voice at all. This continent is full of humans. Need to find black. Can't feel him asleep. I hide, find, need, report. The other black shadow shook, and then slowly walked towards the coastline, while the speaking black shadow reinserted the tentacles into the white man's brain. The next moment, something surprising happened. With a strange rustling sound, the black shadow slowly became smaller and softer, and drilled into the white man's head little by little. 5 minutes later, the two black shadows had disappeared, and the dead white man suddenly sat up. Without blinking, he just looked in the direction of Daxia, with a strange smile on his face. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 77. At an altitude of 10,000 meters, a huge blue and white passenger plane was flying towards the north of Daxia. There are more than 400 cubic meters of space inside the aircraft. In addition to some seats and seat belts, the entire aircraft is also equipped with bedrooms, bathrooms, gyms, restaurants, offices, medical centers, and even an operating table. Most of the furniture on the plane is made by skilled woodworkers. This luxurious passenger plane, which can be called a palace in the sky, is the special plane belonging to Daxia Longke, SpecialAbilities. At this time, in the restaurant on the lower level of the plane, Li Enping and Li Qian were sitting at the dining table eating. The meals on the plane are all provided by the in-flight kitchen, and all the ingredients are of the highest quality and provided by sophisticated professionals. Li Qian usually doesn't eat much in order to stay in shape, but this time she rarely eats more. In comparison, Li Enping eats a lot. Although the soul can be used as his energy source, he is very happy to use food instead, not to mention the food in the kitchen is delicious. Li Qian wiped her mouth, watched Li Enping eat for a while, and then poured herself a glass of red wine. Asked, "Would you rather?" Li Enping shook his head and stuffed another steak into his mouth. Li Qian took a sip of red wine with an expression of enjoyment. Seeing Li Enping still devouring it, she couldn't help but ask, "Is it enough? Are you full? Do you want me to ask them to bring some?" Li Enping ate the last roast chicken, then wiped the corners of his mouth and said, "It's almost done. It's useless to eat too much. Don't you ask me why I took you to Tianjing." Li Enping looked up at Li Qian and said, "I believe you must have your reasons. As long as I can help you." Li Qian heard this and looked at Li Enping eagerly. Li Enping turned his head awkwardly and said, "Your abilities are very useful. I'm not familiar with Tianjing, so I need your help." Seemingly knowing what Li Enping was worried about, Li Qian continued, "Don't worry, I will do my best to help you. You don't have to worry about the matters in Emerald City. Qin Yang has taken over Zhonggai Hall and Lucien has been placed under house arrest. When he has no value, he will be executed. All the cotters of Zhongai Hall will be settled by Chiu Ho. But why do you think of letting Qin Yang do it? He is a good policeman. I hope he can do a good job. Through the cooperation between Zhongai Tang and the police, he can reduce the security of Emerald City. I don't expect him to completely eliminate criminal activities such as prostitution, drug trafficking, and gambling. I only hope that there will be fewer people. I hope I can kill fewer people next time I come to Emerald City. Li Anping looked at his hands and asked, what about Fang Qi? I didn't want to kill him either. Who knew he was so weak? A drop of cold sweat broke out on Li Qian's head, and she said with a wry smile, Fang Qi is already very strong. According to the information from the intelligence department, he is also among the top 10 among the young generation of Bio Kingdom. If it were not for his identity as an illegitimate child, he would also be in the top 10. I won't come to Daxia. Illegitimate child? Are you sure? Li Anping asked. Yeah, Li Qian nodded, news from the intelligence department. You don't know how angry SpecialAbilities was that day. He cursed all of us bloody. But fortunately you kept the body intact. Now they have recovered Fang Qi's body, which is a surprise. The abilities of the 6 major departments are different in different departments and have different causes. For example, bloodline abilities are generally believed to be derived from human DNA inheritance by major organizations in the world. Therefore, the corpses of bloodline ability users are often worth thousands of dollars, especially for well-known abilities such as Kirin blood. As Bio, the exclusive superpowers of the royal family are what various organizations are trying to study. Li Qian's eyes flashed with worry, but Bio Kingdom has begun to exert pressure. Although it is not stated explicitly, everyone knows that it is because of Fang Qi. You must be careful when you arrive in Tianjing. The northern front is tense now. If Bio takes the opportunity to attack, I'm worried that Daxia Longke will not be able to withstand the pressure from the top and hand you over. Based on your judgment, would SpecialAbilities do this? Li Anping asked calmly. Li Qian shook her head, I don't know, but in Daxia Longke, SpecialAbilities is not the only one who makes the decision. The flying general, Zhu Rong, and the captain of the special service team. At least these 3 people are no less than SpecialAbilities in terms of strength and power. Do you know their capabilities? Except for people with multiple abilities like SpecialAbilities, the abilities of the other 3 are all extremely secret. But judging from the name, Flying General should be able to fly, right? Zhu Rong may be able to control flames. That's not necessarily true, Li Anping said, the name and nickname may confuse others. Li Anping snapped his fingers, and several people walked in from outside the restaurant door and started clearing the table. Li Qian followed him to the upper level of the plane. But it doesn't matter. I have no conflict of interest with them. As long as they don't do anything they shouldn't do, I have no interest in dealing with them. Li Qian nodded slightly and followed Li Anping obediently to the bedroom. There are computers, network cables, wooden cabinets, pure leather sets, spear stalls, and even a bathroom. Not only is it fully equipped, it even has a floor-to-ceiling mirror, an electric shaving table and other modern equipment. You can rest, I want to surf the internet. Li Anping walked towards the leather sofa in the center. Li Qian nodded obediently. She knew that Li Anping went online every day and received a lot of information from the internet. Some were news about current events, which was one of the bases for his investigation targets. There were also many knowledge from all aspects, such as interrogation, language, psychology, finance, and military. He was like a whirlpool, frantically receiving information from various channels. Li Anping, who was lying on the sofa, fell into it. His right hand reached for the cabinet next to the sofa, on which there was a tablet computer, which was connected to the wireless network on the plane. When he opened the tablet computer, it was a half-watched video. The name of the video was Children's Swordplay Basics. Li Anping clicked on it to continue, and he could see a child of 14 or 15 years old, holding a sword, performing basic movements such as chopping, stabbing, tapping, and lifting, repeating over and over again. This is the swordplay that Li Anping has been studying recently. He hasn't started to study how to use his high-frequency knife yet. Although it was very powerful to just chop randomly with his strength and speed, he still planned to read more about swordsmanship and swordplay, so as to avoid using the wrong force and destroying the high-frequency sword. After all, Daxia Longke did not equip all its members with this equipment. In Li Anping's pupils, the boy on the screen was reflected in the simple swordplay movements. His brain instantly recorded these movements and then compared them with the textbooks he had read before. In the past, he punched and kicked casually, but after reading these textbooks, he found that there was a lot of knowledge in these punches, kicks, swords and knives. He was so reckless as he used to, which could be said to be a waste of most of his strength. If he could use the strength of every muscle and tendon as described in the textbooks, the destructive power would have a leap. I'll find a place to practice when I get to Tianjin. Li Anping thought to himself as a series of various martial arts textbooks flashed through his mind. Then he thought that as a militarized superpower organization, Daxia Longke should have more practical textbooks in this regard. The teaching materials on the internet are confusing. Li Anping even found the so-called secret books that can control swords, spit fire, and palm thunder. It is really difficult for ordinary people to distinguish the authenticity of those martial arts secrets. Many of them are mainly for fitness, not for killing enemies. Although Li Anping has the ability to heal himself and is not afraid of random practice, it is a waste of time to practice blindly. I heard from Dongman before that Bio Kingdom has special royal martial arts. Many people with abilities who fight with their bodies need fighting and fighting skills. There must be no shortage of such people in Daxia Longke, and there should be martial arts teaching materials in this area, just like the military fighting skills of ordinary people. Ask SpecialAbilities to bring a copy to see. However, even with this plan, Li Anping still watched some videos he searched for a few hours on the plane. They were all basic skills, but they were very inspiring to him. Looking at the white clouds outside the window, Li Anping thought of the purpose of his going to Tianjin. As the center of Daxia, there will be more criminals and more people with abilities for him to devour. There will also be more resources to train him. He will become stronger and stronger until no one can stop him. At 5:45 p.m., at Tianjin International Airport, Li Anping and Li Qian walked out of the airport gate carrying their suitcases. Li Qian hung up the phone and said to Li Anping beside him, "They asked us to wait here, they will be here soon." Li Anping nodded and said nothing. He was reading materials on his phone. They were all introductions to Tianjin, maps of Tianjin, and various popular attractions. He looked like an ordinary tourist who came here for the sake of fame. Half an hour later. "Hey, what happened to you? You said you would be here, but after waiting for half an hour, there was no one. How do you work? Traffic jam? Can't you come out early if there is a traffic jam? I want to complain to your boss." Li Qian cursed a few more times and finally hung up the phone fiercely. Then she said to Li Anping with an apologetic look, "I'm sorry, they said there was a traffic jam on the road. It will take another 3 hours to get there, so we have to take the subway by ourselves. I'm sorry, I didn't arrange it well." Li Qian lowered her head, her face full of self-blame. "These sly guys, I think they think we are newcomers and want to give us a head start." "It's okay, Li Qian." Li Anping raised his head, turned back to the airport, and walked towards the subway on the second underground floor. "It's good to take the subway," he said. "I just checked online, the traffic situation in Tianjin is very bad, driving yourself is far less fast than taking the subway. And the subway here is well connected, so you don't have to walk much by yourself." "Yes," Li Qian nodded, without saying anything. Once Li Anping spoke, she would respect Li Anping's decision. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Seong Go. Chapter 78. Because the person who was supposed to receive them could not arrive in time, Li Anping and Li Qian had to take the subway to their destination. That was the temporary residence arranged by SpecialAbilities for them in Tianjin. SpecialAbilities himself had a meeting today, so he would come to see them tomorrow. Tianjin was indeed very prosperous, and it also brought Li Anping many surprises. There was an endless flow of people, and densely packed high-rise buildings. The ground was also cleaned very cleanly, and there was no odor in the public toilets. The shops in the airport were fully equipped with all kinds of food, drink, and entertainment. The public security was also better than Li Anping imagined. At least from the airport to the subway, Li Anping exhausted his eyesight and listened carefully, but he didn't find any thieves. This is much better than Emerald City. It's just that there are too many people. Li Anping looked at the crowd in front of the subway platform, which was crowded together like rice, and couldn't help frowning. Seeing Li Anping frowning, Li Qian said, "Forget it, there are too many people. Why don't we take a taxi?" "It's okay, let's take the subway." Li Anping relaxed his brows. "Anyway, there will be traffic jams on the bus, so the subway is faster." A few minutes later, the crowd became more and more congested, but the subway finally arrived at the station. Li Anping and Li Qian squeezed into the car with the crowd. Because he was squeezed by the crowd, Li Anping could only try to relax his body, fearing that his body would be pushed back accidentally and be pushed to death by others. Fortunately, they were lucky. The two finally squeezed to the door. The car was full of people and there was no room for standing. So the people behind could no longer squeeze in. Just when Li Qian breathed a sigh of relief, she suddenly felt a black shadow rushing over, and saw a tall and strong man with a travel bag on his back, facing the car directly, and bumped into it. Li Qian screamed in pain, and felt that the man leaned on the travel bag and kept squeezing into the car, pushing Li Qian, who was standing at the door, inward. But there was no room left in the carriage. When he pushed, several people in the carriage complained quietly. The man had sweat on his head, his travel bag leaned against Li Qian's body, and he kept pushing in. "Push in a little bit. Push in a little bit, there's still room." As he spoke, he pushed hard, but suddenly felt a hand on his shoulder, and he couldn't move at all. The man shouted at Li Anping, "What are you doing? What are you doing with your hand?" Li Anping said impatiently, "The carriage is full, why are you pushing? Wait for the next one." "Hey, this subway is owned by your family. It's none of your business whether I squeeze or not." The man glared at Li Anping with a red face and thick neck and shouted, "I'm in a hurry to get on this train, what's wrong?" After that, he pushed hard towards the carriage and pushed Li Anping's hand away with his hand. But Li Anping's strength was not something he could shake. The man felt as if he had hit a mountain, and then the mountain pressed down on him. From an outsider's perspective, it was just seeing Li Anping wave his hand lightly, and the man seemed to be pushed by someone, running directly towards the platform for more than 10 meters before stopping. As soon as he stopped, he immediately turned around and cursed at Li Anping, and wanted to rush to the carriage. But after a few steps, the carriage door was closed, and he could only watch Li Anping disappear in front of him with a calm face. The place SpecialAbilities arranged for Li Qian and Li Anping belongs to a community in the northwest suburbs of Tianjin. It is about 40 kilometers away from the city center. The two took the subway all the way and were squeezed in. After more than half an hour, they finally got off the station. After getting off the station, according to the address given by SpecialAbilities and the mobile phone map, the two walked and searched, and finally found the place. In front of them was a villa area. Li Anping took a rough look. There were villas in the community, and basically all had private garages, gardens, lawns, and courtyards. The villas were hundreds of meters apart. Whether it was greenery or decoration, they all looked very high-end. As soon as the two walked to the gate, they were stopped by the security guard. "Hello, are you looking for someone?" the young security guard said with a smile. "Hello, I'm Li Qian. Someone should have notified you." Li Qian walked up and talked to the security guard. Li Anping, who was standing by, looked around and found that there were cameras everywhere. Most of the parked cars and the cars that drove in were also very valuable. Even the street lights on the road outside the community were special. They were different from the street lights on ordinary roads. They were stone pillar street lights in the same style as the community. No matter how you look at it, this is a high-end community where rich people live. After some negotiations, the security guard confirmed Li Qian's identity and looked at the two people with more respect. "You two, the villa you live in is a bit far away. Let us take you there." As he said that, another security guard had already driven an electric four-wheeler, which looked a bit like an electric golf cart. Li Qian glanced at Li Anping, and seeing that he had no objection, she sat on it. Along the way, Li Qian chatted with the security guard, asking about the details of this community. However, the information obtained was not much, but it was understood that the people living in this community were either rich or noble, with strong backgrounds, especially many familiar faces on TV news, which could be seen in the community. Li Anping did not participate in the conversation. He looked at the scenery in the community, which was more luxurious than Shang Zhenqiu's Bihai Fangzhou when he was in Zhongdu. Swimming pools, golf courses, gyms, these are considered very ordinary. There are even hospitals, cinemas, and shopping centers in the community. Not only that, the security guards here are different from those in other communities. They look younger, and from Li Anping's point of view, these security guards are quite capable. They are all strong, smart and tough. They seem a bit like members of the Kylin group, but they are more orderly and disciplined than the people in the Kylin group. Li Anping instinctively dislikes this place, but he doesn't hate it so much that he wants to leave immediately. The electric car jogged all the way and arrived at the destination 10 minutes later. This is a villa at the northernmost part of the community. Compared with other villas, it has a larger area because of the orchard. However, the decoration is more simple, with only 2 floors, and the walls are covered with ivy. The iron gate also looks a bit rusty. Li Anping and others walked to the iron gate and saw a red sports car slowly coming out of the underground garage. When the sports car drove to the iron gate, the gate opened automatically and the sports car stopped in front of Li Anping and others. The car window was pulled down, and a sweet, young face appeared in front of everyone. "Who are you? Who are you looking for in my house?" The young woman looked at Li Anping and others and asked in confusion. The woman was young, with a fair and tender face, and looked youthful. But in terms of appearance, she was no less than Li Qian. However, her colorfully dyed hair and high eyebrows gave people a domineering feeling, and she seemed difficult to approach. "Miss Xia, this is Miss Li Qian," and old Xia arranged for them to move in. "What? They want to move in?" The woman frowned and stared at Li Qian and shouted, "No, this is my home, how can you let other women move in casually? I won't allow it. You can arrange for them to go to the hotel, not just anyone can live here." "But," the security guard said in embarrassment. Li Qian, who was standing by, saw this and said to the girl, "It was General Xia who asked us to live here. I wonder if there is any misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding. Xia Ligang is my grandfather. He never told me that he would arrange for someone to live here." The girl honked the car horn and said impatiently, "You can live wherever you want, but not at my house." "Miss Xia, did you call your grandfather to confirm that he did give me the address here?" "Confirm what?" The girl saw that Li Qian was still trying to argue, and ordered the security guard beside her, "Didn't you hear what I said? Take them out quickly. I advise you to investigate more and don't let anyone in. The level of this place is all up and down." The security guard said to Li Qian helplessly, "Miss Li, Why don't you stay in the hotel in the community now and wait for Mr. Xia to come? Li Qian was about to speak. But Li Anping on the side spoke, forget it, Li Qian, this is not a good place. Let's find a place to live by ourselves. Who knew that as soon as he finished the sentence, the girl spoke again, what are you talking about? Why are you so sour? You don't have the money to live in this place, so you say this place is not good? I tell you, you will never be able to buy a toilet here in your life after that. She looked at Li Anping's ordinary clothes and simple suitcase with contempt. Hearing that Li Anping did not insult, Li Qian was angry and threw a piece of paper out, shooting towards the girl's eyes. Who knew that the paper flew less than a meter away, and 2 security guards reacted instantly. One of them stood in front of the girl and caught the paper. The other rushed directly to Li Qian, trying to subdue him. After all, Li Qian's ability was only level 0, and he didn't really want to touch the girl, but just wanted to scare her, so the paper was soft and was caught by the security guard at once. But when the security guard looked towards Li Qian, he saw that his companion who rushed towards Li Qian had been grabbed by the neck with one hand by Li Anping and thrown towards him. The 2 people collided with each other and turned into a rolling gourd. However, they were indeed well-trained soldiers. After rolling a few times, they stood up and took out a pistol from their arms and pointed it at Li Anping, who was blocking Li Qian. Don't move. Squat down and hold your head with both hands. It was not until then that the girl reacted and shouted in the car, okay, you want to kill me? Hurry up and catch these 2 terrorists. I want to interrogate them personally. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 79. 2 security guards pointed guns at Li Anping. Because Li Anping gave them the most dangerous feeling, especially the action of throwing people over just now. But they were unwilling to actually shoot, after all, they were the people invited by SpecialAbilities. But while they were hesitating, the girl behind them was still urging them to go up and catch the person. On the other hand, Li Anping and Li Qian had indifferent expressions and looked very calm. He just looked at the security guard and the girl coldly. As long as they fired, their lives might not be in their hands. At this tense moment, a cough broke the deadlock. SpecialAbilities fell from the sky and stood between the 2 groups. He snorted coldly and shouted at the security guard, what are you doing? Point a gun at me. General, the 2 security guards hurriedly put their pistols back into their holsters, saluted and stepped aside. The girl behind him immediately shouted, Grandpa, what are you doing? They were just trying to bully me. Okay, it's all a misunderstanding. SpecialAbilities turned to Li Anping and said, I'm sorry, I've been so busy during this period. I forgot to tell my granddaughter that you would come and stay for a while. After saying that, as if he hadn't seen the 3 people with cold faces, he pointed at the girl and said, Xia Yunyun, my granddaughter. Then he pointed at Li Anping and Li Qian and introduced, Yunyun, these are Li Anping and Li Qian. They will stay here during their stay in Tianjing. Li Anping didn't speak, only Li Qian forced a smile and said, it seems that it is indeed a misunderstanding, so hello. Xia Yunyun sat in the car and sneered, don't be so affectionate, I didn't agree that you can live here. She shouted towards SpecialAbilities, Grandpa, I don't want them to live in my house, put them go to a hotel, guest house, wherever, they are not allowed to stay at my house anyway. What did you say? SpecialAbilities' face turned solemn when he heard this, and the air around him seemed to have dropped a few degrees. After all, he is a person who holds great power all year round. Once he gets angry, the pressure is not something ordinary people can bear. Seeing SpecialAbilities' serious face, Xia Yunyun was like a sealed amber, not daring to move. However, seeing Xia Yunyun being frightened by him, Xiaolikan immediately came to his senses, grinned reluctantly and said, Yun Yun, stop being naughty, Li Anping and Li Qian are both guests, you have to entertain them well. I don't want it, Xia Yunyun shouted like a cat with its tail stepped on, I don't want others to live in my house. After saying that, she stepped on the accelerator, and the red sports car rushed out. In a few seconds afterwards, even the shadow could not be seen. Xiaolikan turned his head and said, you go first. The two security guards walked away as if they were amnesty. Xiaolikan said helplessly to Li Anping, I'm sorry, my granddaughter is too naughty and made you laugh. Aren't you going to chase her? Li Anping asked. Xiaolikan smiled and shook his head, leading the two of them into the courtyard. Yunyun was brought up by myself. I was too busy in the past and had no time to take care of her. When I discovered something was wrong, I couldn't take care of her even if I wanted to. I didn't expect that after working hard all my life, my granddaughter actually became an official generation. Li Qian was curious about where Xia Yunyun's parents were, but she didn't dare to ask random questions when facing a big shot like Xiaolikan. However, Li Anping didn't have such an estimate and said bluntly, what about his parents? Where are they? Xiaolikan stopped, glanced at Li Anping, and said, 10 years ago, when we were fighting Ice Castle, the Star Alliance attacked the Great Xia Dragon Bird headquarters and many people died. Yun Yun's parents also died at that time. That battle? Li Anping asked curiously, was it tragic? Xiaolikan's tone revealed a trace of vicissitudes of life, it was tragic. The headquarters was not in Tianjing at that time. 99% of the combat personnel in the base died, and even many children died. They were all children of their families. Being able to survive this way is also the result of the hard work of many soldiers. Seemingly feeling that the atmosphere was a little heavy, Xiaolikan began to introduce the courtyard with a smile, I planted the orchard outside, the lawn inside, and the garage over there. The car keys are on the workbench in the garage. You can drive whichever car you want. Which one? By the way, do you have a driver's license? Li Qian nodded, and Li Anping shook his head, no, but I can drive. Okay, I'll have someone get one for you another day. Xiaolikan opened the door of the villa, the house is a bit old, don't dislike it, just treat it as your own home. You can stay in the guest room on the second floor. It has a private bathroom. It's raining. The kitchen is next to the living room. You can cook it yourself. If you want to eat, you can also call the management. The hotel was originally arranged for you, but for some things I thought it would be more convenient to stay at home, so I brought you here. Sorry to trouble you, Li Qian thanked her. It's nothing. By the way, if there's anything you don't like or need in your room, just call the property management and ask them to change it. Yes, we will, Li Qian said, but speaking of which, General, you look really young. You don't look like someone with a granddaughter at all. I'm curious too. Li Anping sat on the sofa and glanced at some daily photos on the counter. There are Xiaolikan, Xia Yunyun, and a boy and a girl, who should be Xia Yunyun's deceased parents. Xiaolikan laughed, I am actually over 70 years old, but as long as my ability reaches level 5 and my body is transformed by energy and thoughts, being younger is nothing at all. Even if my lifespan is several times that of ordinary people, it is nothing normal. He did not forget the importance and benefits of practicing mindfulness and ability as recommended by Li Anping from time to time. I thought you and your clone looked similar at this time. Xiaolikan looked like a thin scholar. Compared with the exotic appearance of the Phantom Dragon clone in the Emerald City, he looked more simple and kind. How is that possible? Xiaolikan suddenly stared at Li Anping, speaking of which, you punched me in the Emerald City and Fang Qi's death. We haven't settled the accounts yet, have we? I did something wrong in this matter, what do you want? I now have the power of the 4 dragons of wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. How about we have a fight now? After saying that, Xiaolikan looked at Li Anping with a playful expression. Do you think you can definitely defeat me? Li Anping said, just fight. Where are you? Just the lawn outside. It's not a life and death battle anyway. Just decide the winner. After saying that, Xiaolikan stood up impatiently and strode towards the door. He must conquer Li Anping this time, establish a correct outlook on life and values for this boy, and make him work obediently for Daxia Lonke. Li Anping on the other side stood up not to be outdone, and walked to the lawn outside the house with Xiaolikan. Li Qian looked at the two people at a loss. She didn't know how they could start fighting at the first thought. Didn't they have a good chat just now? It's a pity that neither Li Anping nor Xiaolikan could listen to her and sit back and drink tea obediently. Li Qian could only follow him out with a worried look on his face. On the lawn, under the sunset, Xiaolikan and Li Anping stood opposite each other. The wind blew across the lawn, seeming to bring out a wave. Xiaolikan took off his shirt, revealing his muscular body, and then there was lightning, and a whirlwind kept rising and falling around him, appearing and disappearing. Xiaolikan said loudly, my ability is to possess 8 dragon clones. As long as one of the clones still exists, I can be reborn even if I die. So, Li Anping, when the fight starts, use all your strength. Don't wait until then. If you lose the fight, say that you let yourself go. You don't need to say more about this. Before he finished speaking, there was a sound, and Li Anping appeared behind Xiaolikan. At this time, there was a loud bang from the place where he was standing. During the loud noise, Li Anping had already punched Xiaolikan in the body. But Xiaolikan seemed to have predicted the result in advance. He tilted his head slightly to let go of Li Anping's fist. Then a whirlwind rose up from beneath his feet, and he flew into the sky. This is to judge the opponent's movements in advance through the reaction of the opponent's mind energy. Xiaolikan's voice came from above. Li Anping raised his head and found that the other party had flown to a height of more than 50 meters. Li Anping was about to jump hard when his chest suddenly tightened, and then he heard the sound of wind blowing in his ears. Something dangerous seemed to be gathering in the atmosphere. Boom! A bolt of thunder fell from the sky and hit Li Anping directly. Before he could react, lightning struck one after another, all focusing on Li Anping, turning Li Anping into an electric man in an instant. No matter how fast you move, can it be faster than lightning? Unless you predict my movements in advance, you will never be able to dodge this attack. Xiaolikan in mid-air was filled with lightning, like the king of thunder. Shot out bolts of lightning from his hands and hit Li Anping. Seeing Li Anping being struck by lightning continuously, his hands and feet trembling, Xiaolikan laughed and said, I know your body is very strong, but no matter how strong your body is, if you are struck by lightning, it will be paralyzed. Immediately after the lightning flashed, Xiaolikan appeared in front of Li Anping. The infinite lightning in his right hand struck Li Anping's chest like a thunder. With a loud bang, Li Anping flew directly over a distance of more than 100 meters and landed motionless on the ground, his body emitting a burning smell. Ah! Li Qian screamed and rushed towards Li Anping. But he was stopped by a whip that turned into lightning. Don't go there, it's not over yet. After Xiaolikan finished speaking, he walked towards Li Anping, he will not die so easily. Hearing this, Li Qian looked towards Li Anping and found that he had slowly gotten up. Although his body was in tatters, the places that were originally scorched black by lightning had healed and fallen off at a speed visible to the naked eye. He stared closely at Xiaolikan, who was walking towards him. Although he was half kneeling on the ground, his eyes exuded endless fighting spirit. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 80. Xiaolikan looked at Li Anping and shook his head. I know what you want to do when you come to Tianjing. To act chivalrously, to punish rape and eliminate evil, that's probably what it means. Putting aside the correctness of doing so, do you think you have the right to do so? Does this power do this? You'll know if you try it. Bang. The sand under Li Anping's feet exploded into a cloud of mist. His men rushed towards Xiaoliang again, but this time he did not attack with a direct punch, but kept spinning around Xiaoliang. Xiaoliang looked at Li Anping, who had left after images in the air that could no longer be distinguished with the naked eye. He nodded first, and then shook his head. The speed is very fast, but your intention to attack is too easy to detect. His body was like paper blown by the wind, and he casually dodged a few punches from Li Anping, and then said, "Your thoughts are completely dependent on the instinct is moving. I can clearly feel the direction of movement and the position of the punch." While Xiaoliang was talking, Li Anping stepped hard on the ground while running. The dirt, dust, and turf were squeezed out by the huge force and filled the air, completely blocking Xiaoliang's sight. But no matter how hard Li Anping punched, none of his punches hit Xiaoliang. "I know what you are thinking. When I was in Emerald City, I only had one phantom dragon clone, so I couldn't react to your speed. But here..." Boom! Like an air bomb, the whirlwind exploded with Xiaoliang as the center, sweeping away all the dust in front of him. "Thoughts can allow me to sense your intentions. Thunder and lightning can speed up my body, wind can assist the movement of my body, and I can also sense everything in the air." After Xiaoliang said this, he snapped his fingers with his right hand, and the electric light formed a circle, centered on his body, and spread out in all directions. Forced, Li Anping had to retreat towards the rear. This is a shape created by thunder and lightning combined with thought energy. It can make the violent thunder and lightning easier for me to control. The halo formed by thunder and lightning expanded a full 50 meters before disappearing without a trace. Among the great Xia dragon birds, there are two people who are as strong as me. There is even one person who is stronger than me. Xiaoliang looked at Li Anping, who was standing still in the distance with a mocking look on his face. "You can't even defeat me with the power of the four dragons now. How can you carry out the so-called chivalry and justice, reward good and punish evil? Not to mention the social unrest that these actions may bring, I'm afraid you will be arrested soon after you have just done it. The power of the state machine is far beyond your imagination." As Xiaoliang spoke, the electric light on his body became brighter, and a thunder dragon appeared from time to time in the clouds above his head. Under his feet, a whirlwind was dragging him up, about 1 meter above the ground. Coupled with the bursts of thunder he made when he spoke, the whole looked like the god of thunder was alive. If it were in some remote mountainous area, I'm afraid he would be directly worshipped as a god. Li Qian on the side looked extremely worried. She originally thought that Li Anping was strong enough, but now she saw Xiaoliang's strength and realized what it was to be scary. The opponent manipulated thunder and hurricane at will, beating Li Anping as if for fun. Unexpectedly, when Li Anping heard this, he just smiled coldly. "Okay, the warm-up is almost over." The next moment, the muscles on Li Anping's body suddenly expanded, and he suddenly transformed into a little giant more than 2 meters tall. It's really great under normal conditions. If you use all your strength, you should be able to hit him, but this is not enough. This is the conclusion Li Anping came to through the temptation just now. If it's in an explosive state, we should be able to beat Xiaoliang now. Let's try it first. At this moment, Xiaoliang felt an astonishing sense of threat coming from Li Anping, as well as the boiling malice. It seemed that countless people were in pain. The desperate wailing sounded in Xiaoliang's ears. He seemed to have it again. He saw the hell he saw in Li Anping's mind the last time he was in the Emerald City. Then, a sonic boom sounded. Li Anping's movement directly exceeded the speed of sound. The speed was so fast that the air had no time to get out of his body. It could only be compressed tightly together. The accumulated air simply formed a layer in front of his body. If you slow down and look at materials similar to wave surfaces, a cloud-like thing will appear in front of Li Anping. Li Anping seemed to be moving forward against a wall. If his body were not strong enough, he would be broken into pieces every second. Although Xiaolikan could predict in advance that the opponent was going to attack his chest through his mind energy, it was of no use. When he finally tried his best to dodge to the side, the sound wave from the sonic burst had just reached him. In the ears. And Li Anping had already crossed his body. Even if he could predict it in advance, he didn't even have a chance to react when faced with Li Anping, who traveled faster than the speed of sound. Xiaolikan subconsciously touched his right cheek, and a faint trace of blood appeared. He didn't even know when he was attacked. More than that, things are not that simple, because after exceeding the speed of sound, the air vibration caused by Li Anping's movement itself changing the air pressure, that is, the sound wave, can no longer catch up with his speed, so the air vibration is superimposed, forming a destructive vibration wave. That is the so-called shock wave. Or vacuum waves. Boom. The shock wave swept through Xiaolikan's body. A large area of grass and rocks was lifted up. Li Anping then rushed towards the orchard. He saw that wherever he passed, the trees were destroyed within a straight distance of more than 200 meters, leaving only a bare passage. At the end of the passage, Li Anping just stopped with difficulty. He half crouched on the ground, and his body had returned to its original size. There were bloodstains all over his hands and feet. Those were the shock waves, or shock waves, that were cut on his body after his body hit the air. It was the first time to use full-strength sprinting. Even Li Anping himself was shocked by this speed. The sound barrier, sound cone, shock wave, these sudden appearances made him unable to react at once. Not only did he fail to control the direction, but he also passed by Xiaolikan. He was unable to stop in time and destroyed a large area of orchards and lawns. Li Qian on the side stared blankly at the scene in front of him, which was like a hurricane passing by, and was so scared that he couldn't speak. Even Xiaolikan was silent when he saw all this. Rubbing his arm, Xiaolikan climbed up from the ground. Li Anping's supersonic speed seemed to be very powerful, but the most powerful force was the destructive power of his own body. As for the shock wave, it would at most rupture the eardrums of ordinary people. Of course, if Li Anping could use supersonic speed to actively create shock waves. But now, the destructive power in front of him was just the destructive power caused by Li Anping's passing by. If it was in ancient times, if Li Anping was facing an army of thousands of people, I'm afraid that Li Anping could defeat the army with just a few sprints. Then there was the sound of a car coming, and shouts of surprise were suppressed in the throat. Several security guards trotted to Xiaolikan, looked at the man who was already in tatters, and whispered, "General, are you okay?" "It's okay." Xiaolikan shook his head, looked at Li Anping deeply, and said to the side, "Get ready and repair the lawn and orchard." "Yes." "Are you hungry?" Xiaolikan said to Li Anping, who had already walked over. "Let's have a meal together." "It's at my house." "I'll call to order what you want." "More meat is fine." Li Anping asked Li Qian to walk back to the villa together. Judging from his appearance, his physical injuries have healed. Half an hour later, Li Anping and Xiaolikan had taken a shower, changed their clothes and sat at the dining table. The table was full of specialties from all over Daxia. The most eye-catching thing was a roasted whole lamb placed in the middle of the table, which was ordered at Li Anping's request. At the table, the three of them seemed a little worried. They didn't speak, but ate silently. "This dish is really delicious." "Is it a specialty of Tianjing?" Li Qian said with a smile, pointing to a dish. He was worried that after such a fight, the relationship between the two would not be good, so he wanted to adjust the atmosphere. Xiaolikan was so old and had experienced so many struggles. How could he not understand Li Qian's thoughts? He gave her a reassuring smile and said, "This one is pretty average. Next time I will take you to the canteen of the base. There are top chefs in the country, and this dish is even more delicious." The two began to talk. Xiaolikan asked how they were doing in Emerald City, and Li Qian also asked Xiaolikan about the situation in Tianjing. Although Li Anping still didn't talk much, the atmosphere was not as stiff as it was at the beginning. Suddenly, Li Anping put down his bowl and chopsticks and said to SpecialAbilities, "Teach me how to control my mind and how to improve my abilities. Although I won't join the great Xia Dragon Bird, I won't be an enemy of you." Li Qian moved her mouth and was about to say a few words to help, but she didn't say anything. After all, SpecialAbilities didn't know the relationship between her and Li Anping. If she helps to persuade him here, it seems a bit too enthusiastic. And if SpecialAbilities is not willing to teach Li Anping after a fight, then her saying a few more words will be useless. SpecialAbilities was silent after hearing this. The atmosphere in the restaurant was so dull that water could drip out. Just when Li Qian thought SpecialAbilities was going to refuse. "To be honest, I was really shocked when I saw your performance today. With my current 4 dragon power, I dare not say that I will definitely defeat you, but this makes me feel that if you don't join the great Xia Dragon Bird, it will be a huge loss for us," SpecialAbilities said. "Let's talk."